We're coming up on the halfway point of the 2025 NBA season, and it's given us fans some very interesting storylines so far. From the emergence of young superstars to the fall-off of disgruntled NBA vets, we've learned a lot about certain players and teams already. So today, I'll be going over just a few of the things that the 2025 NBA season has taught us so far.
The true definition of false hope. Every single season you come in, you're like, oh yeah, Zion, he's in the best shape of his life. Zion, he's ready. And he always gives you false hope within that short span that he plays games. If I'm the Pelicans, I'm considering trading Zion Williamson.
Zion Williamson is way too unreliable to be a franchise player. Now, I think most NBA fans remember the hype around Zion Williamson as a prospect. In a 2019 draft class that showcased a lot of really promising prospects, it was still all but a no-brainer on who the number one pick would be. And honestly, his play at Duke backed up the notion that Zion was just a tier above everyone else in his class. At the time, it was very arguable that Zion was the most touted and hyped up prospect since LeBron James, and he was supposed to be next up to take the torch from LeBron and become the next face of the NBA. Now fast forward half a decade, and we're basically halfway into Zion's 5th season in the NBA, and he's played over 65 games in a season only once in that span, and has only played a total of 6 games so far this season. To put into perspective how crazy that is, if we redrafted the entire 2019 draft class simply based on how many games each player has played since joining the league, he would still go number 1, only in the second round. And since he's currently injured, it's looking like he could drop even further in that draft. This is in large part due to the fact that he just can't cut his weight, despite the fact that this could very likely resolve a lot of his injury issues. It's gone to the point where the Pelicans have stipulations within his contract centered around periodic check-ins where he has to make a certain weight in order to guarantee some of his money in his contract. However, especially since he's injured, which makes it even harder to meet those weight goals, it looks like he's going to lose out on a lot of money because he just can't hit those weight benchmarks. And this has led to him firing his agent recently, which I can only imagine is out of frustration due to how much money he's going to lose as a result of these stipulations. And this is super sad to see, especially since when he's on the court, he's been the generational talent that we all expected him to be, at least earlier on in his career. Over these past couple of seasons, it's looked like he's even regressed slightly as a player on the court as well, which is a bit concerning, but it makes sense when you're missing so many games and struggling to stay healthy. It's hard to find your rhythm. But it's just super unfortunate, especially as someone who was super high on Zion coming out of college, to see how his career is panning out. Now for the Pelicans as a whole, they've just been super unlucky with injuries, especially this season, which is why they currently find themselves in last place in the West. But to have your star player miss this many games only compounds that issue. So much so that I think it might be time for them to move on from Zion Williamson, especially while his trade value is still somewhat high, at least high enough for you to get maybe 1 or 2 solid young pieces and a couple of picks from a contending or desperate team. Either way, I just don't see it working out in New Orleans as long as Zion is the star and number 1 option there. Now onto a highly touted prospect who did live up to the hype. We have last year's number 1 overall pick, Victor Wembanyama, who had an amazing rookie season, especially post All-Star break, where he really started to string together some really solid performances on the offensive end of the ball, on top of his already DPOY caliber defense. But this season, he's taken another leap forward. So far this season, Wemby is somehow a better rim protector than he was last season, and has strung together some of the most impressive defensive game that I've seen from a player, basically in NBA history. Over his last 6 games, he's averaging 4.6 blocks per game, including a game where he recorded 8 blocks. And on top of that, in this stretch, he's averaging 30 points per game, 4 assists, and 9 rebounds on 49, 38, 90 splits. When you're 7 feet 4 inches tall and shooting 38% from 3, hey man, it's going to be scary for the league. And this isn't really an anomaly either, because other than his points per game, which have jumped up 5, and his 3-point percentage, which has improved slightly within this stretch, he's basically recording those numbers for the entire season. And he's not just putting up numbers in losses either. He's led the Spurs being a very respectable team out west with a record of 17-16 and the 9th seed in a very competitive Western Conference. Actually, this was recorded January 2nd before the January 3rd games, and the Spurs just beat the Nuggets, so they're sitting at 18-16 and now have the 8th seed after Wemby just went toe-to-toe with Jokic. So he's continuing this streak, but the record has changed slightly since when I recorded this. But anyways, back to the video. but all of this has sped up their timetable exponentially to the point where they could honestly be one all-star caliber player away from being a genuine contender out west. Now, I think a lot of people expected Victor to be this good eventually, but what's surprising is how quickly he's figured it out and how quickly his offensive game has developed. His play is really forcing a lot of NBA fans to start having some really uncomfortable conversations, specifically at the ripe old age of 20 years old. Is Wemby already a top 5 player in the world? Or if you really want to get nasty with it, is he in serious conversation to be the best player in the league already? And personally, I'm not mad at it, because outside of Jokic and Giannis, is there anyone in the league that you can confidently say is better than Wemby? I really don't think so. And if he keeps progressing at the rate that he has been, man, hey, again, the league is in serious trouble.
Karl Anthony Towns on the move out of Minnesota. Developing story here on SportsCenter. The New York Knicks and Minnesota are finalizing a trade involving Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo, along with the first-round draft pick for Karl Anthony Towns.
The next thing we've learned this season is that the Knicks absolutely fleeced the Timberwolves in the Cat trade. Now, I think we all knew who won the trade when it first broke, but honestly, it's looking worse and worse by the day. Starting in New York, the Knicks are sitting at 24-11 with the 3rd seed in the East, only 2 games behind the defending champions, the Boston Celtics. Led by the duo of Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns, with a super solid supporting cast, they look like they're a real threat to come out of the East, especially when Mitchell Robinson returns from injury, whenever that may be. Cat himself is looking like a rejuvenated version of himself, averaging 25, 14, and 3 on 55, 44, 84 splits, and he's even in MVP conversations, sitting at 7 on the Kia MVP ladder, and has the 4th best odds according to Basketball Reference's MVP tracker. Now, obviously, I don't think he's really going to win the award, but it's just a reflection and a testament to how well he's been playing this season. So, hats off to Cat, man. He's hooping. And if he keeps it up, the Knicks are going to go super deep into the postseason. And like I said, they're serious contenders to come out of the East this year, in my opinion. Now, on the other side of the deal, the Wolves made a mistake that I think is going to cost them Anthony Edwards in the long run, if not sooner than that. It's really just crazy to me that the front office decided to trade a franchise cornerstone, a top 5 center in the league, and one of your young superstars' favorite teammates right after they just brought y'all to a conference finals, your first conference finals in 2 decades, just to save some money from the cap hit. And what do you get in return for your second best player? Dante DiVincenzo and Julius Randle. Are you nuts? Honestly, the front office deserves everything coming to them, which I assure you is a couple first, maybe second round exits, and Anthony Edwards requesting a trade, followed by another decade of mediocrity. Dante DiVincenzo has been so aggressively mid as a player. He's an above average defender, but on the other side of the ball, his shooting percentages are just bad. Shooting sub 40% from the field is inexcusable, and Julius Randle has had his moments, but overall doesn't come anywhere close to filling the scoring gap left by Cat. And dear God, if I have to see him in another isolation scenario just one more time, oh my God, losing my mind. Seeing him try to create his own shot is genuinely painful to watch, and on a team severely lacking in players who can create their own shot, yeah, this team as it's currently constructed is getting bounced in the first round this season. Minnesota really just dropped the ball here in the most avoidable way possible. Finally, DeMar DeRozan was not the answer, and the Kings need to blow it up. Speaking of trades that looked flashy and led to marginal, if any, improvement, we have the DeMar DeRozan trade. Honestly, I was somewhat high on this trade when it happened, and while I didn't think this made the Kings championship contenders at all, I thought it was a solid pickup that might make them a 4-6 seed out west and maybe a fun dark horse team come playoff time if everything gelled right. But boy, I could not have been more wrong. The Kings currently find themselves in mediocrity hell as they hold the 12th seed and are 4-7 in their last 11 games. And while I want to say they're going through a rough patch and they're better than their record indicates, just looking at all the teams above them in the standings, I just can't say that. They're just simply worse than practically all of them. And while DeMar's stats are solid so far this season, he just doesn't fit this roster. As one of the worst three-point shooters in the league, he really doesn't belong on a Kings roster that ranks in the bottom third of the league in terms of three-point percentage. On top of that, he can be a bit of a ball stopper at times, and he's also not a remarkable defender or anything, especially at this point in his career, and all this combined has contributed to where the Kings find themselves right now. They fired Mike Brown, which changed nothing because, spoiler alert, he wasn't the problem and he's a good coach. And on top of all of that, De'Aaron Fox declined to sign an extension and has also started making comments about not being happy with where the team is right now and that he wants to compete right now, which is obviously not what Sacramento is ready to do at the moment. The clock has already started ticking, and if the Kings don't figure it out soon, Fox is going to be out the door. Sabonis will follow soon after that, and they'll be doomed to the bottom of the West yet again. But with all that being said, what do y'all think of the 2025 season so far? In my opinion, it's been one of the most entertaining seasons in recent memory. But what have been the biggest surprises for you so far? Let me know down in the comments below. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe for more NBA content. Have a great day, and I'll see y'all in the next video. Peace.